morning, everyone, and welcome back to Wake and Take. It's your boy Jason, and we've got some football to talk about today. I'm home from the Senior Bowl, so that's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be recapping some of the best players that you're going to be taking in your Dynasty drafts coming up in just a couple months. So go ahead and take out your coffee, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. And welcome in, everyone. I see Happy Hudson here in the chat, and I'm sure some people are starting to file in as it's Wake and Take time, ladies and gentlemen. We've got Senior Bowl standouts, and we're going to talk about them all. I'm really just going to kind of pull up the roster, and we're going to go by the American team and the national team, talk about my thoughts from kind of the Senior Bowl and everything. And then maybe even we'll go through my Twitter. As you guys probably saw, I did film a lot of highlights from the week and post them to my personal account, as well as put together some takeaway videos and stuff like that. Another one will be dropping after this episode, as I didn't have time finishing the touches of the editing and wanted to get live. But really, before I get into it, I do want to talk about what the Senior Bowl kind of is, right? Because I think that a lot of people maybe not necessarily overstate, because it is a very, very important event that we all go to. But the way the practice is set up is it's very hard, I would say, to truly come away with this player's gonna be a stud, if that makes any sense. It is just 3 days of practices. And I do want to say, particularly the quarterback position is the hardest to evaluate at this event. For the most part, it's 2 hours that each team gets every day, so 6 total hours of practice. But the first hour, I would say for half of that, really there's only 3 hours of actual practice, like reps against the defense and stuff like that. The first day is usually spent kind of getting warmed up, getting acclimated. There'll be some reps maybe against coaches, maybe some one-on-one reps. Of course, those are always going to be happening. But as the players kind of feel out the event, as well as the practices that the coaches are putting together. And it's also different on every team, as there's different coaches for every team. The second day is usually the most important day of the Senior Bowl practices. That's where usually the quarterbacks have at least figured out certain things about the wide receivers they're throwing to, and it's a little bit more intense of a practice. And then the third day kind of becomes not necessarily a relaxing day, but it's like, for example, yesterday the national team went about 3/4 speed the entire practice. There is the game on Saturday. Generally, the game has never really meant much for the Senior Bowl. Most people and analysts look at this practice as the most important piece of feedback. However, also, I am curious, is this year, not a lot of players, a lot of players dropped out before the Senior Bowl, but not a lot of players dropped out. In fact, no one on the offensive side of the ball dropped out of any of the practices. For example, last year, Ladd McConkey, Ricky Pearsall, Xavier Legette, really the list went on and on of players who maybe only went to 1 practice or 2 practices and didn't go to that second or third because they felt that they showed enough. And that wasn't necessarily the case this year. This year, no offensive players bowed out. They all showed up all 3 days. They all practiced. And they all pretty much made some sort of flash play here or there. And what I see a lot of people on Twitter and really around the space kind of latch onto is some of those highlights. And I just want to kind of take a beat for a second and really talk about what that means and why it's pretty easy for there to be a lot of highlights and why you can't latch on to kind of one thing. If you turned into the decision point yesterday, you'll see that on and talked about how the tape from all the games throughout the their college career is a big part of it. The Senior Bowl is another big part of it, and what makes the Senior Bowl so special is the fact that this is our first time really being able to see these players right next to other players kind of the same caliber, all going into the NFL draft, all trying to make a name for themselves, all trying to show up in a big way. yes, of course, you're playing your hearts out at the college level, but a lot of times it's not always against players going into the pros. It's against, sophomores, freshmen, stuff like that. So the Senior Bowl is a really, really great place to size up these rookies. See how they look next to the other one. See how they look running these routes. See how they look in these kind of more physical settings and stuff like that. So I'm going to talk about all these players here, and I'm going to give my true standouts and talk about why. And I want to go ahead and preface this and say I'm not really going to talk about any of the quarterbacks. I firmly believe that this event in particular will not really give you enough time to truly evaluate a quarterback. You need to go back and look at the tape for the quarterback. Yes, you learned some things from the Senior Bowl. For example, Jalen Milroe, he has really good arm strength, but didn't really show a ton of accuracy until really day 3. But then it's very easy to say, hey, these quarterbacks have never thrown to any of these wide receivers before. And like I just said, you really only have about an hour each day and only over 3 days to get to learn how to throw to these players. So in particular, this is a very unfair place for the quarterback, where you're really able to make a name for yourself is as a receiver. Because the running backs, really the big takeaways for me is which ones looked good as receiving running backs, and kind of the one-on-one linebacker drills or catching out of the backfield. When they're running up the middle, the defensive line isn't really allowed to tackle them for the most part. It's like they can't really tackle them. They can bump into them, they can wrap them up, and that's kind of where it ends. So it's pretty easy to make some of the bigger runs as a running back. The big thing that I like to watch is their hands, their route running, and that kind of extends to the wide receivers as well. And so that's where we're going to spend most of our time. And I just wanted to kind of talk about that because I see a lot of people just kind of overreacting to a bunch of highlights on Twitter. And what you need to take into account when you're doing that is if you only see one highlight, that's probably not that good. You do want to see multiple. Tons of these. You want to see, here's a good clip of this player. Here's a good clip of this player. Here's another good clip of this player. Almost every player is going to have a highlight play. That's the nature of the beast down there. You're going to have these opportunities. Running backs, they can't really be tackled. Wide receivers, right? They have just one-on-one against the corner. Yes, of course, that's where you can really evaluate them. But also, of course, they're going to win some reps sometimes. In fact, most of the time, they're going to win their reps. The corners, they can go anywhere. And there's not a whole defensive scheme or anything. So, I just feel that that's important to talk about before we get too far into this. But I also don't want to make any mistakes about it. It is an incredibly important place and process of the draft, or part of the draft process. You learn a lot about these players. It's just important to really kind of hone in what you learn from these players. And for the most part, it's how they stack up against the competition and how they look in these one-on-one reps. And that's what we're going to talk about. So let's go ahead and get into it. We'll start with the American team. And they actually went second in the order of practice, believe it or not. But they are first on the roster. And that's where I'd like to start. And then we'll kind of just work through the roster, talk about some of the standouts from each team and why I felt they stood out. And then maybe we can scroll through my Twitter and find some highlights, answer some questions at the end, depending on how we go. But so the quarterbacks on the American team were Jackson Dart, Jalen Milroe, Riley Leonard, and Seth Hennigan. To me, and this is going to be the hot take. I said I didn't want to talk about quarterbacks a lot, but like I said, when it comes to quarterback, you can't over-evaluate them at this place. And so I do want to say that, honestly, Jalen Milroe was totally fine to me. I know a lot of people are out there talking about how bad Jalen Milroe looked, but I just don't believe that this event is one in particular for a quarterback of his skill set. He's not given an opportunity to scramble at all. He's not given a chance to run at all. They are making him basically be a pocket passer. And to me, I was kind of impressed how he developed throughout the week. He was not good day one. He was overthrowing receivers and running backs left and right. But as I talked about, that's to be expected. He's never thrown to these players before, and he wasn't accurate really on the film. But as day 2 went along, day 3 went along, he improved every single day. He still missed passes even on day 3, but that's fine. He did show really good arm strength, did show that he could zip it in there, and did complete some of these deeper passes that were fairly accurate. He went from kind of overthrowing on day 1 to underthrowing on day 2, and then on day 3, he honestly honed it in a decent bit. And I know a lot of people are out there saying he didn't look that good. I thought he looked totally fine. I don't think he looked great by any means, but as we talked about at last year's Senior Bowl, none of the quarterbacks looked great. In fact, I talked with a bunch of people who were there when even Josh Allen was at the Senior Bowl, and almost everyone there would say that Josh Allen didn't even look good at the Senior Bowl. So it's just such a hard place to evaluate these quarterbacks that the way I'm going to do it is how do they improve throughout the week? And to me, Jalen Milroe improved the most throughout the week, and that really did stand out to me. Jackson Dart had some small improvements as well, but one thing that really concerned me is he fumbled like a million times. He was dropping snaps left and right. He even dropped shotgun snaps. He was dropping it under center, and that was kind of concerning to me. Yes, he made some tight window throws, but he didn't really look the part either. And yes, you could also argue that this isn't a good event for his type of quarterback play either, and that's probably the case. But I really like what Roster Watch tweeted out after day 1 and said that the QB3 of this class is still wide open. We're going to watch this process unfold before our eyes. Don't pencil in or even Sharpie in anyone yet. It could be Milroe, it could be Dart, it could be Ewers. It's kind of a flat circle when it comes to the draft process. But I personally feel that Jalen Milroe improved throughout the week and was totally fine. Yes, he overthrew some receivers. Yes, he showed some of his inaccuracy, but he also made some big plays. And I know that that's not even the biggest part of his game. And so I am curious to see how he looks at the combine, curious to see how he looks at this pro day, and curious to hear how the scouts kind of viewed him as well. But I'm not writing him off. In fact, I would probably say if I were to pick a quarterback from this event, I would go with Milroe. Now, the running backs on this American team were pretty good. I'm not going to lie. They were pretty good. We had Brashard Smith, Trevor Etienne, Devin Neal, Marcus Yarns, RJ Harvey, and Jarquez Hunter. Brashard Smith out of SMU, I'm going to go ahead and say it was the most balanced running back at the Senior Bowl. This is actually this year's kind of Tyrone Tracy, Antonio Gibson. He's a wide receiver turned running back. Last year was his first year as a running back, if I'm not mistaken, at SMU. And Brashard Smith out of SMU looked like he had honestly been playing running back his whole career. In fact, after day 1, I had the chance to speak to him. Maybe it was day 2 that I spoke to him. Doesn't really matter when I spoke to him, but I spoke to him and I said that, hey, I was actually very impressed with your vision and patience as a runner. What can you kind of say about that, especially transitioning over from wide receiver? And he just said that that's kind of the thing that he's looking forward to the most, that he's trying to learn the most, that he's focused on in his gameplay, and that he feels he's getting more and more patient as he gets into this position. And he demonstrated that time and time again. And he demonstrated he was a good route runner. He demonstrated that he had really good hands. He demonstrated that he has good vision and patience behind that offensive line, and really did look to be the most well-rounded running back at this event. That was Brashard Smith out of SMU. I really do think that he's going to be a consistent riser throughout the process. If you go look at his weigh-ins over at the 33rd team, they have it all. You can see that he's 5'9", 195 pounds, so slightly small, but that 195 pounds will help him a ton. And like I said, he looked good in every aspect of the practice. Good at catching, good at route running, good at running. And also was pretty decent in the pass protection drills as well, but I don't care about pass protection when it comes to these running backs for our fantasy teams. Yes, of course, that's how you get on the field, but as we know, Chase Brown was terrible at pass pro, and look what he's been able to do. It's something that you can learn. It's something that different coaches will kind of focus on, so that's kind of the least of my worries, but he was still okay at that. Trevor Etienne out of UGA. He was very quiet day 1 in my opinion, but I would say that he looked the best days 2 and days 3, and I had heard some rumblings that he wasn't going to show up for day 3. He did end up showing up, so that was cool, but it is interesting to kind of hear those rumblings, which means he probably did hear some good stuff. And Trevor Etienne, Travis Etienne's brother, another running back that looked very well-rounded like Brashard Smith. course, he's more of a pure running back, but he actually was the fastest running back at the Senior Bowl, Trevor Etienne was. And he has some decent size. Still a little undersized, I won't lie. He's 5'8", but he does have that 202 pounds. And he was really, really quick. He clocked over 20 miles per hour on day one and finished the week as the fastest running back at the Senior Bowl as well. You can find those metrics online if you just look up like the Senior Bowl metrics. I'm not sure the website, but you can find them. And Trevor Etienne, fastest running back there, and really did show some expertise in the running back catching drills, if you will. He was dicing up linebackers left and right, and also made a couple good grabs. One on day 3 at the end of practice, he was given the final one-on-one rep on offense against a UGA player. He cooked him, caught it jumping in the back of the end zone, and on day 2, he had another kind of contested jumping catch as well. So that was really, really cool to see the hands and receiving abilities of Trevor Etienne. He really did look incredible, especially on days 2 and days 3. Devin Neal, this is one of the running backs that we were kind of excited to see. He has 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons at the University of Kansas, so he's a more well-rounded running back. Unfortunately for him, I don't think that the Senior Bowl is quite an event where he can truly stand out. He was incredible to interview. I do think he will be good at the next level. But like I said, he's not really able to demonstrate his power or anything at this type of event. It's not like a full contact type thing. Maybe he'll show up in the game or something like that. But Devin Neal, he's 5'10", 220 pounds, and you could kind of tell. He wasn't bad at receiving by any means, but he definitely wasn't the best receiver out there or best receiving running back out there. In fact, I would probably say he was the worst in this group, but I don't want that to come across as he was bad at it. He still caught balls. He just didn't necessarily get much separation from linebackers, but that's also not his game. He's a running back that can catch the ball if need be. So Devin Neal didn't really flash to me at this event, but he did look good. And this is one where I'm just kind of curious to see what landing spot he gets and where, like, what kind of uphill battle he has. RJ Harvey, Jarquez Hunter, I'm not going to lie, they were about the same to me. I don't think they stood out in any which way, but they were good everywhere as well. They had some big run plays. They looked better as receiving running backs than Devin Neal. Especially RJ Harvey. RJ Harvey, really, really good at receiving, especially route running. He had some really good wheel route type stuff, as well as just kind of cutting to the outside. RJ Harvey was a good route runner for sure and demonstrated some good hands. He did have one dropped pass, but that's just going to happen throughout the week of practice, so I'm not too concerned about it, especially as a running back. In fact, yeah, I would probably tough to rank. RJ Harvey I would put above Jarquez Hunter throughout the week, but Jarquez Hunter looked good as well. Maybe like slightly above Devin Neal as a receiving running back, but not quite as good of a runner, maybe. So that'll be another one where I'm curious to see where he lands. Really, all of these running backs, I'm curious to see where they land outside Brashard Smith and Trevor Etienne. And lastly, I do want to talk about Marcus Yarns. This is probably going to be like the Ryan Flournoy of this year for me. Not saying I'm going to get as hyped unless he gets a really good landing spot. Then I might get hyped. But Marcus Yarns, out of Delaware, so FCS running back, looked really good. I'm not going to lie. He's 5'10", 189 pounds, so he weighed the least. He's definitely going to have to add on some pounds. But I talked about Brashard Smith being a receiver turned running back. I would argue that Marcus Yarns looked like the best receiving running back. He didn't look like the best running back, especially at his size. In fact, Marcus Yarns took the biggest hit of the week. He actually got totally flattened by one of the linebackers out of South Carolina. Should not have hit him that hard. That's not how this practice is supposed to go, but he did get kind of walloped, and I think that woke him up a little bit. But Marcus Yarns actually, after day 1, was Chris Johnson's standout running back. CJ2K said that Marcus Yarns looked really good, and I actually had the chance to interview Marcus Yarns and said that he's been talking with Chris Johnson. He met him after that Senior Bowl practice and connected with him, and he's going to be working with Chris Johnson to kind of learn some extra things about the game. He has 4.3 speed and has an incredible cut. He was breaking ankles left and right in the receiving drills and looked pretty good in space if he was given it, but he wasn't that good between the tackles. I'm sure he'd be fine at it and can learn it. This is 100% a complimentary running back to another team. Like, this is not going to sound great, but like his ceiling is Jahmyr Gibbs. Year one, maybe, like where he's not really getting all of the volume. David Montgomery was getting the volume, but he was able to show up in a big way in the receiving game. And I think that that's going to be very important to keep our eye on. If Marcus Yarns gets a landing spot, not like Baltimore, I don't want to say Baltimore, but like that, where like Derrick Henry can handle all the between the tackles and they just want someone to catch passes out of the backfield, then I think that we should get very, very excited about him. He was the best receiving back, I would honestly say, by far. He was so quick, really, really good cuts and route running, really soft hands, and I think he's going to end up running in the 4.3s at the combine and hopefully kind of bulk up a little bit on top of that to help kind of get between the tackles. And if he's going to be learning from Chris Johnson throughout this process, I'm going to get pretty excited about that. So that's the one name that I'm definitely keeping a big eye on throughout this process is Marcus Yarns. You know, I like to latch on to one smaller school guy that kind of impressed me and showed up when I didn't expect it. And that this year, last year was Ryan Flournoy. This year it's Marcus Yarns. And hey, I know that Ryan Flournoy didn't hit in year one, but still to get drafted, get on the field from that kind of adversity that he faced, I think it's impressive. And it's still only year one, so we'll keep an eye on him for year two for sure. But Marcus Yarns looked really, really good to me throughout the practices, especially as a receiving back. Now on to the wide receivers. The American team wide receivers. Isaac Tesla, Jamal Pritchett, Jack Besh, Kamir Dyke, Ty Felton, Arian Smith, Kobe Hudson, Jalen Royals. Not going to lie. South Alabama, Jamal Pritchett made some decent plays, looked good as a route runner, but incredibly undersized. Not really going to keep my eye on him much further. Isaac Tesla, I don't even remember him really being there. I hate saying that. I'm sure. I remember him making like one kind of good catch. A lot of these wide receivers are depth pieces. I won't lie. This year's Senior Bowl didn't have a ton of standout wide receivers like last year. Last year we had Lat McConkey, Xavier Legette, Ricky Pearsall, Roman Wilson, and there was nothing like that this year, really. As I said, no one skipped any practices. Everyone played all 3 days, and that is a big signal that no one really looked elite. Like, we're probably not getting any first-round picks from this year's Senior Bowl on the offensive side of the ball. And that's fine. That's normally how the Senior Bowl goes. I was just slightly disappointed in no one really flashing in a big way. But I will not talk about every wide receiver like I have every running back. I will focus on the ones that I noticed and what I noticed about them. Jack Besh out of TCU. Kind of quiet on day one, but on days 2 and 3, he stacked up big days. He's 6'1", 212 pounds, and that size was on display all 3 practices. But especially day 2 and day 3, he made some nice contested catches and kind of turned into Jalen Milroe's favorite target. And that's always kind of cool to see a quarterback latch on to a wide receiver at these events. He kind of kept going his way in the red zone and even took some deep shots his way. I would say that Jack Besh probably had the best catches from the week. If I had to pick one, he had one really, really good contested catch on day 2. And on day 3, made a nice little sideline grab as well in the end zone. So Jack Besh looked pretty damn good out of TCU. And most of that was kind of his size and his hands, but he was a decent route runner. When I say decent route runner for him, it's more of like a strength thing. He was able to like kind of push off and gain his set, like didn't really gain much separation, but his strength helped out in a big way when it came to catching the ball and kind of pushing off in a route, if you will. So he looked really good. I won't lie. Jack Bech did kind of impress me. I'm kind of coining him like this year's Ricky Pearsall, where like it wasn't like crazy flashy in any way, but he did kind of demonstrate some strength, make some big plays here and there, and that was really, really nice to see. Arian Smith out of UGA. He looked good all 3 days. It was really interesting to watch Arian Smith out of UGA, I will not lie. He is 5'11", 175 pounds, but he looks like he weighs 200, and he looks like he's at least 6 foot tall, so I don't really know where those measurements came from. He looks a lot bigger and faster and everything than that kind of suggests. He plays big, I guess would be the term. He was a really good route runner. He was quick out of his breaks. The big thing with him was kind of some inconsistency. He did make flash plays every single day, but especially on day 2, if you checked out the episode with Roster Watch, Cody and I talked about how he kind of hit a wall. He made like some really big flash plays, and then like he kind of kept slipping in his routes and had a drop here and there. But Arian Smith out of UGA bounced back in a big way on day 3. On day 3, he didn't have any drops. He caught some touchdown passes and red zone work, was able to get open on some of like the quick slant type stuff, and really did look like one of the better wide receivers at the Senior Bowl. It's pretty funny because he's known to not have hands, and he just kept making big catch after big catch after big catch, and I swear all of my mentions on Twitter throughout the week were just like, wow, like UGA fans like complaining that Arian Smith developed hands after leaving UGA because he, dropped balls in crucial situations and wasn't a consistent receiver at UGA. And at the Senior Bowl, he was kind of inconsistent. Like I said, he kind of hit a wall on day 2, but he did bounce back. So I'm very curious to see where he lands in particular. I think if he gets a good landing spot, he could be a pretty decent wide receiver too. I won't lie. He needs to add some weight, even if he looks bigger than 175. But still, he was getting open a lot, making some big catches, and his speed was pretty much consistently on display. He does use his body to catch the ball. That is a concern, but he was catching the ball. Unlike QJ, right? Like Quentin Johnson uses his body to catch the ball and drops. Arian Smith was using his body to catch the ball and caught it. So that is something he needs to work on, but he was a really good route runner and still made some big catches and stuff like that. Ty Felton out of Maryland. He showed up kind of big on day 1. He looked probably the best wide receiver on day 1 on the American team. Days 2 and days 3 was a lot quieter. This is Ty Felton out of Maryland. He's quick. And has some decent route running skills, which was nice for his size at 6 foot tall, 186 pounds. But like I said, kind of quieter throughout the week and didn't necessarily separate himself in any way. Sorry. Long week. The last wide receiver I want to talk about from this group is Jalen Royals out of Utah State. Jalen Royals is an interesting one. He's 5'11", but he's 210 pounds, and he also looked taller than 5'11". So some of these measurements are kind of making me scratch my head based on what I saw being next to them and seeing them next to some players who were quote-unquote bigger than them. But Jalen Royals out of Utah State, what's important about him is he's actually recovering from an injury. Theo and I both spoke to him, and both times he said that he feels he's about 80%. He looked at least as good as everyone else there. And so to say that about someone who's about 80%, that's pretty impressive to me. And what really stood out for me was his strength. He's a really strong route runner and really has strong hands as well. Didn't gain a ton of separation, but if he did, it's because of his strength, like using his shoulder, kind of pushing off, but not quite pushing off. And in some of the shorter drills, even if he didn't gain separation, his hands were so strong that he was able to kind of catch and hold on to the ball. So Jalen Royals is someone that I am very much keeping my eye on throughout this process. I think if he can get healthier and show up in a big way at the combine, that would really, really boost his draft stock. He's another one that could be a really, really solid wide receiver, too, for an NFL team. None of these wide receivers, not a single one is a wide receiver 1. I will not lie. We do not have like a Ladd McConkey. We do not. I hate to say it. That's on the American team. That's on the national team. But still, really good wide receiver 2s. I think we have a lot of day 2 players in this bunch. The tight ends is where it gets really interesting. The big one that I'm pretty much going to only talk about here is Mason Taylor. Mason Taylor was the tight end on the American team. Strong hands, good route running skills, great size as well. Mason Taylor is, let me get his measurements for you. I want to have this correct. Mason Taylor is 6'5", 250 pounds, and you could kind of tell. You could also see him continuously gain separation against linebackers, but if he didn't, which was rare, he had really strong hands. Really strong hands. And he was a good blocker as well when they kept him in line. Mason Taylor was the best all-around tight end at the Senior Bowl, bar none. Good at blocking, good size, good hands, good route running. Mason Taylor looked awesome. I don't have a comp for him. I need a comp for him. But that's the one to keep your eye on from the Senior Bowl. Mason Taylor, in terms of all around. Like, he's going to probably get round 2 draft capital, if I were to guess, and could end up actually having a pretty decent rookie year. But if he doesn't, it's because they kept him more to block and maybe didn't get the right landing spot. But he looked amazing and really, really did impress, especially days 2 and days 3 as he got more comfortable, but even on day 1 as well. Thomas Fedone out of Nebraska, real brief, really long arms, good blocker, good size. Curious to see where he goes, but I don't think he'll really be that fantasy relevant. The fantasy relevant one here is going to be Mason Taylor out of LSU. And those are kind of the takeaways from the American roster. I would say that Jalen Milroe, Jackson Dart were the best quarterbacks, and I would honestly put my Jason take out there and say that Jalen Milroe is not that bad. In fact, I would probably take him out of any of the other quarterbacks from the week. Rashard Smith, Trevor Etienne were probably the 2 best running backs on the American team, but we do need to keep our eye on Marcus Yarns as a receiving running back. I'm very curious to see where he lands and how he goes in the draft process. He's going to be a 6th, 7th round pick, okay? But if he gets the right landing spot, he could definitely make some impact as a receiving back. The better wide receivers throughout the week were Jalen Royals, Arian Smith, and Jack Besh from the American team, and the best tight end was Mason Taylor. Before we get into the national team, why don't we hear a little bit about Fast Draft?
Oh, incredible news about Fast Draft. Fast Draft DFS is live. It's called the Flex 6 Frenzy. You just draft 6 guys, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends for the Sunday slate. You like Jahmyr Gibbs? You like Jackson Smith and Jigba? You like Tyrone Tracy? Draft them, draft them, draft them. And the beauty is, you can just order 5 teams, submit your rankings, and Fast Draft will email you the results. We awarded $1,000 in prizes our first week, and we're just going up from there. Soon there's going to be a select 6. No drafting at all. You just pick any 6 guys. Our DFS mantra, just say no to salaries on Fast Draft. Don't forget there's free tools on Fast Draft too. You want to get ready for startup season? We've created the best Dynasty mock draft experience there is. And if you want to play in these DFS contests, and our best ball contest for 2025 are coming very soon too, just use promo code PODFATHER when you deposit and you get a free draft. It's that easy. And you're like, oh, I already have Fast Draft. Great. Refer a friend. Have them put your username in as the promo code, and then you and your friend will both get an instant deposit match up to $25. We got DFS. We got Dynasty Mocks. We got Best Ball. It's all there for you on fastdraft.app. Check it out. And the promo code is PODFATHER.
Go check out Fast Draft. I'm sure there'll be a DFS contest for the Super Bowl if that isn't out yet, as well as, of course, the Flex 4 contest and the Origins contest, the All Rookies tournament, coming out soon. Fast Draft Best Ball for 2025 is live. Go ahead and get ahead of some of the ADP discrepancies, arbitrage, if you will, and have some fun. You can use promo code JASON for a first deposit match up to $25, which will get you 5 entries into any tournament for free. National team. What? My overlay isn't changing. Or is it? Let me know if this overlay is changing. For me, it still says American team. My mic volume is at max, by the way, Happy Hudson, so I can't actually affect that, unfortunately, unless StreamYard is doing something to me. But okay, the national team. The overlay did change. Nice. The national team receivers were the best. The quarterbacks are as follows. Tyler Shugg, Dylan Gabriel, Taylor Elgersma out of Canada, actually. So that was kind of one of the interesting storylines. Taylor Elgersma was the tallest out of all of the quarterbacks at the Senior Bowl. He's over 6'4", and that's honestly about it. He looked the part of a quarterback, but didn't really impress in any way. Really, the only quarterback from this team that made an impact was Dylan Gabriel. But Dylan Gabriel, guys, he's 5'10", 202 pounds. He's very, very small. And he looked very, very small. He made some good throws. He's left-handed, kind of looked like a tiny Tua out there. And was a good passer. He, put the ball in the right spot, especially on day one, which was kind of impressive. I'll say he honestly lost some steam throughout the week, which kind of concerned me. He looked probably the best after day one, and then days 2 and days 3, it went elsewhere. It went elsewhere. So I wasn't really impressed by any of these quarterbacks. I know a lot of people are maybe talking about and hyping up Dylan Gabriel. It was fine. He made some good throws, but his size is a major, major concern to me. The running back that stood out was probably Ollie Gordon the second. The running back group on the American team was better than the running back group on the national team to me, at least in terms of explosiveness. Like I said, the Senior Bowl really does a good job at kind of elevating the receiving backs. They get the one-on-one chances against linebackers, so they kind of get to show off their route running. They get to show off their hands in a big way. This group of running backs, they weren't as good of the receiving running backs as the other group, and didn't really make any of the big flash plays until day 3, at least. Donovan Edwards made a nice little... he broke someone's ankles on day 3, so that was kind of cool to see. Woody Marks had a good run at one point. LaQuint Allen looked decent. Damian Martinez looked decent. Bashal Tutin on day 1 did not look that good, but on days 2 and 3 started to look a bit more explosive. Kind of like almost like a little bit of a Maurice Jones-Drew out there, but not quite as good. But Ollie Gordon the second, give that full government name there. He's 6'1", 233 pounds, and you could tell. That dude was easily the biggest dude out there, was basically looking like a tight end if you stood next to him. And when I shook his hands, my bones all touched each other, and I thought he was going to break my hand. It was kind of impressive but scary how he's got grippers. So Ollie Gordon was very impressive, especially by his size. He didn't look explosive by any means, but he had good hands. He was an okay route runner. And I just don't think that this event is one where he can really, really demonstrate his strength and size. But other than looking strong and sizable, but he did look probably the best running back out of this group, especially if you take into account his size. The rest, they were good. I mean, I just want to see their landing spots, really, before I kind of hype them up in any which way. Donovan Edwards, awesome interview, awesome guy, very balanced running back. Didn't necessarily make any flash plays until day 3, but he did on day 3, especially in the route running drills, so that was really nice to see. But otherwise, I didn't really come away with any big notes from Jaquavius Marks, Woody Marks, LaQuint Allen, Damian Martinez, or really Bashal Tutin. Bashal Tutin maybe kind of, especially on day 3, and day 2 maybe, kind of started to show up a bit more in terms of his speed and explosiveness. But the American team, to me, kind of stood out more in the running back room than the national team, outside of Ollie Gordon, who just looks like a big guy. And I don't even know what that means, really. He was just big. But we did see, obviously, before returning to Oklahoma State, his junior season, he did have over 2,000 all-purpose yards. So the production is there. Went down a lot his senior year, which is why he's lost a lot of steam. He'll probably end up being the 3rd running back taken. And if he can get a good landing spot, it'll be good. But he didn't necessarily show any big explosive plays like some of the other running backs did. But it just looked good. The wide receivers on the national team were better than the wide receivers on the American team. We had Pat Bryant, Daquan Felton, Xavier Restrepo, Jaden Higgins, Kyle Williams, Jalen Knoll, Tez Johnson, and Jalen Lane. I want to take a beat here to talk about how this event elevates certain types of wide receivers. Because it's a lot of one-on-one stuff, and because there's not necessarily a big scheme going on the defense, this really does help out the route running wide receivers, the shifty guys, the undersized guys in particular. So I see a lot of people hyping up Tez Johnson, who weighed in at 56 pounds. You heard me right. Tez Johnson weighed in at 156 pounds. That's less than Jacob Cowing even. And I came out last year talking about how small Jacob Cowing looked, but still looked pretty good. Wasn't able to make an impact really because of his size. And Tez Johnson, he could be Tank Dell. Cody was always talking about it could be Calvin Austin. And to me, honestly, I see a lot of people hyping up Tez Johnson. He was fine. He looked good, but those types of wide receivers will always look good at the Senior Bowl. And that's why I'm so grateful for all the great people that kind of allow me to learn from under them, especially over at Roster Watch. Alex Dunlap and Cody Carpentier, have to shout them out. Alex Dunlap's been going to 14 Senior Bowls. This is his 14th Senior Bowl. This is Cody's, I believe, 4th. They know a ton about evaluating these players and just ways to not get stuck with the banana in the tailpipe, as Podfather says. And so Tez Johnson looked good, but I'm going to give my take. He looked good because he's supposed to look good at the Senior Bowl. And I didn't see, if you go back to the Tank Dell Senior Bowl, he was showing up in a massive way. He was putting defenders on skates left and right. And I would not say Tez Johnson did that. I would say he got open, he gained separation, and he ran good routes. And I would leave it at that. And that's exactly the type of receiver it is. It very much behooves him to do well at the Senior Bowl, and he would always do well at the Senior Bowl. The wide receiver that really caught my eyes, Cody's eyes, Alex's eyes, Theo's eyes, Jalen Knoll out of Iowa State. I would go as far to say that he was the overall standout at the Senior Bowl. All positions. Jalen Knoll out of Iowa State was the best player there. His size, undersized, 5'9" 3/4, but he's 196 pounds, so he actually has the weight. And he's incredibly, incredibly quick. This is a wide receiver, to me, that looked better than Tez Johnson in all the same ways. Really good route runner, really good hands, really good speed, really shifty. Undersized but weighs more, stronger, made contested catches, literally was doing everything. Jalen Knoll was the clear standout to me. That's the one I'm most excited about. I think he'll also end up kind of being if anyone is to be a Ladd McConkey from this year, it's Jalen Knoll. So remember that name. Start getting your second round rookie picks. That's probably where we're about to get him. He looked incredible out of Iowa State. Really, really good player. Loved watching him practice. Showed up in all facets. And I think he's going to be a big player at the NFL level, especially maybe in the slot, but he looked good on the outside as well. Genuinely all around, even if he's undersized, really good route runner, was electric all week. His teammate, Jaden Higgins. Jaden Higgins, 6'3", 217 pounds. Also pretty shifty at Iowa State. Didn't stand out to me too much, but made some big plays, and there were a couple times he broke some ankles. And so I thought it was really interesting to see that at his size, the shiftiness and route running prowess from Jaden Higgins, especially knowing that they're both from Iowa State. I think that was pretty cool stuff. And I'm curious to see where he goes as well, especially with his size. He's, again, 6'3", 217 pounds. So we'll take that. We'll take that. Kyle Williams out of Washington State. This is another player that I like. Think he's going to have a really big uphill battle. Think he probably fell a little bit, didn't do enough there, but he was the fastest receiver at the Senior Bowl. He recorded a 21.5 mile per hour route, I guess, at one point. He'll probably be one of the fastest wide receivers in the class. And yeah, that's honestly where it is. He didn't, despite being fast, he wasn't able to gain much separation, which I think kind of shocked me. But also, as I talked about, the Senior Bowl, the quarterbacks in particular never really take shots. It is for the more kind of intermediate stuff. So Kyle Williams is someone to keep our eye on, especially to see where he lands. Otherwise, that's kind of it. Xavier Restrepo, I won't lie, did not look as advertised. He looked better on day 3 than he did days 1 and days 2, but he has really heavy feet. He was not like shifty, and that was kind of expected from him. So Xavier Restrepo, I think, was honestly a big faller from the Senior Bowl, unfortunately. And yeah, this was the one that a lot of people were saying might be the Lad McConkey. He was not, nowhere near. He was slow in his routes. I actually would recommend on my Twitter, if you go look at it, if you could search it. I can't search on desktop. They need to add searching on desktop. I recorded a route or a practice drill, a cone drill, where Xavier Restrepo and Jalen Knoll went back-to-back. So you can really see back-to-back the shiftiness of these two guys, and really how I felt that Jalen Knoll was just kind of a class above the rest, if I'm going to be honest with you. So Jalen Knoll is someone we really, really need to keep our eye on. And to the tight ends on the national team, Harold Fannin Jr. out of Bowling Green was the one we were all most excited for. I will not lie. He didn't look as exciting throughout the week. He still looked good. I don't think he did anything to hurt his draft stock. In fact, they even used him as a fullback sometimes, which I thought was kind of interesting. But Harold Fannin Jr. didn't necessarily flash until day 3. On day 3, he did make some good routes, which I thought was kind of cool to see. The big tight end, though, out of the Senior Bowl, at least in terms of the receiving tight end, was Elijah Arroyo out of the University of Miami, the Florida one, the good one. The Miami player we were all excited for was Xavier Restrepo heading in. The one that we're excited for leaving is Elijah Arroyo. This is this year's Theo Johnson. He's 6'4", 250 pounds, incredibly quick. He's very athletic. I'm very excited to see what his combine numbers are. He's going to be one of the big risers from this year's Senior Bowl, Elijah Arroyo, especially as a receiving tight end. So the big 3 tight ends from the Senior Bowl that we need to keep our eye on for fantasy is Elijah Arroyo, Mason Taylor, and Harold Fannin Jr. Those are the big ones. I would say Terrence Ferguson as the last one, maybe. He did make a couple big catches. He's a little bit more balanced. I would say he's similar to Mason Taylor, where he was able to do it all, but not as flashy. So that's where I would rank them. I would say Mason Taylor, then Elijah Arroyo, then Harold Fannin, then maybe Terrence Ferguson out of this year's Senior Bowl. Some good tight ends for sure. Especially like the ones I'm not talking about, they were good blockers. Montevau, Bartholomew, they were good blockers. But the other ones, Fannin, Arroyo, Ferguson, Taylor, they demonstrated lots of good catching skills. And Arroyo in particular was an excellent route runner. He's this year's Theo Johnson, and I'm pretty excited for him coming up to the Combine. So those are my kind of standouts from both teams on the Senior Bowl. It was a very, very fun week down in Mobile. Got to rub elbows with a lot of the guys in the fantasy community. Shout out to Roster Watch for always taking me under their wing. And shout out to everyone I got to meet and hang out with throughout the week. I will go ahead and hop into the chat now, see if we have any questions. Louis says, when is Wake and Take now once every 2 weeks? No, we have at least 2 episodes a week the past couple. But I had 2 episodes this week. I just didn't do Wednesday because I was down in Mobile at the Senior Bowl practice. But yeah, this is the second episode this week. I think I had 3 last week. No, I only had 2 last week. There was just something going on Wednesday. But we're Monday, Wednesday, Friday is the schedule. Next week I will be at the Super Bowl, which is pretty exciting. I'm not sure my show schedule for that. I may only have 1 episode next week. But then we'll get back on track. Don't worry, Louie. I'm here. This is, of course, Brendan Booth Biggs over on Player Profiler now, helping out on the Dynasty stock market, a ton of other shows over at Undroppables and stuff like that. He was down in Mobile. Make sure you follow him. Shout out my chauffeur skills. I drove him around. It was awesome to meet him, chop it up with him, and kind of take him a little bit under my wing, show him some stuff at the Senior Bowl. And he'll be down at the game, so make sure you check out his coverage with that. On it will be there at the game as well. Can anyone go to the Senior Bowl, or is it just for the media? Generally, it's just for the media, but everyone can go to the game. And I'm not sure the credential process, but I'm sure if you just kind of put that you're with an organization, they would probably, maybe, I don't know. I would try. I would say next year apply for credentials and see what happens. Is what I would leave it that. I do think it's pretty important to go down there and kind of see some stuff. It's nice. It's awesome. And Mobile, I won't lie, awesome city. I like downtown Mobile, and I like the surrounding area. It's honestly shocking how nice it is down there in Alabama. I won't lie. It's interesting. It is interesting. But yeah, I will just say, in terms of clips, you don't have to watch me go through my Twitter. I will share my screen real quick just to kind of show that I have it all over there. Just tons of videos from the events. I brought my little camera and was pretty consistent about getting stuff out. So make sure you just kind of scroll through at JFootballWine on the X machine. I've got all the interviews I did. I've got the shows, the highlight clips, lots of good stuff there. And yeah, here we go. Here's Marcus Yarns. Look how quick he is. With that Delaware helmet, I thought it was Kalel Mollings. But no, it was Marcus Yarns. But anyway, make sure you follow me and check out all my videos over at Twitter. This is at JFootballWine. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I am so glad to be back here on Wake and Take. So glad to see you guys, and so glad to wrap up my week at the Senior Bowl. Make sure you stay tuned for my Super Bowl coverage. Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe, and I will see you Monday with some more Wake and Take. Peace!
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.